All right, now for the good stuff. Without further ado, I am honored to introduce Element 451's founder and CEO, Ardis Kadiu. Now, Ardis is the host of Generation AI. This is Enrollify's fastest growing podcast. His co host is presenting in just a couple hours, and you won't want to miss that one either. Ardis's expertise spans AI, technology, education, and design, making significant contributions to higher education. At Element 451, Ardis has been instrumental in developing advanced personalization engines and AI features, demonstrating his deep understanding of AI's practical applications. And as an educator at NYU, he has shared his knowledge in user experience design, web, and mobile development. Today, Ardis is here to open up day two with his keynote, Building an AI-Centric Student Journey. Ardis, turning this one over to you.
Thanks, Mallory. I think that's a great intro. Every time I hear it, I'm like, oh, she keeps adding more stuff in there. So I appreciate it.
Well, you keep doing
Um,
more stuff, Ardis.
it- it's really good being here with everyone. And yesterday's keynote, I think, set the tone for a lot of the things that we've been talking yesterday and today. If you're spending any time in higher education, like things are changing very drastically, and there's a lot of pressure on everybody. So hopefully today we'll talk a little bit more about, the technology side of things as a technologist and as somebody who is building products. I feel like that's an area where I can contribute quite a bit on from my perspective. So one thing that I wanted to do today, before we even get into my presentation, I wanted to share a very quick tool called Notebook LM. And this is a really interesting tool from Google that essentially takes, you can load in any document in here or any videos from YouTube or multiple documents and videos. And it will actually produce, one of the features is it will produce, you can chat with it and you can kind of get a lot of insights out of that. You can build study guides. But one of the things that they introduced recently, which I thought was very interesting, was an audio overview. So essentially a podcast. And in this case, what I did is I loaded in the state of the AI keynote that was put together yesterday. And what I'll do is I'll hit generate I'm going to generate an audio overview. And then we're going to come back to that a little bit later on to kind of showcase kind of exactly what that's going to look like. But, I can customize this and I can say, let's focus on, so the target audience is admissions, is enrollment and marketing professionals in higher ed. So I'm going to just give it a little bit more guidance. So I'm going to hit generate. This is going to take a few minutes for us to generate, and then we're going to come back and listen to it, and maybe we'll share it afterwards, or you can play around with it yourself. But you're going to be amazed at how you can take content and deep content and actually have these folks have conversation with it. So we'll come back to this right after, but let's get into the keynote right now. One of the things that Mallory gave me a great introduction, but I do a lot of kind of AI literacy education. I speak a lot in a lot of different places. I meet a lot of leaders. I meet a lot of you if I'm going to conferences. I do host the Generation AI podcast, and if you want to understand a little bit more about kind of the ideas, and myself and JC, we dive really deep into the angle of AI specifically, but then how, that AI is focusing on the student experience, how that AI is kind of tangential to the higher education, the experience, and everything else. Highly recommend. We're on our episode 49 that dropped this Tuesday with some really big news that JC is coming back to joining Element 451. And I'm really happy about that. But then also, if you want to, again, go deeper into it, but highly recommend that you subscribe and you join, you kind of follow it and just give us some feedback around the podcast as well. We're really happy to do that, to kind of take that, incorporate as part of the show. I want to tell you a little bit more about like why like this idea of personalized student-centric journeys, and how I've been thinking about this ever since I was on campus at NYU. So working there, my own journey through understanding kind of the consumer or the student and how they're interacting with digital products and systems and the institution interfacing with that has really started about a decade and a half ago, right, at NYU. So I was, helping the school with a website and digital deployments of that website and classroom technology. And there was a huge, desperate experience from going to the website, which was really nice, and then going to the application systems, which was in PeopleSoft, and there was just such a broken experience from all of that. So we did a lot of work to help improve that, but I couldn't do it for just one institution. Then I went on to form a marketing agency to help more institutions do that. And then that's where we build a lot of the software, and then start thinking, well, how can we help even more schools? And the product is kind of a natural progression on that. How can we help more schools provide a more personalized student-centric journey, right? From this admissions to into graduation. So this is the problem that I've been thinking and we've been trying to solve for a really long time. And it's kind of, we're falling in love with the problem, and the technology is just a way to amplify and do a lot of that work. And the reason for kind of this idea that the literacy has been the number one thing that we try to work with schools on, and try to move leaders around. So yesterday's student, and a lot of us, we might have been in industry for a few years to maybe decades, but the student and the consumer has changed, and we usually don't see that firsthand, or it's kind of the frog analogy, where because you're in it, like you're not seeing the massive changes, you're seeing the incremental changes, and they don't look like a lot to you. But yesterday's student is very different from today, right? We talk about today's student, and Seth talked about this quite a bit. Today's students are using and interacting with you primarily through technology mediated interactions, right? And they have a very different mindset, and their attention grabbing is very different, and so on and so forth. So rather than me kind of describing that, I've kind of clipped a video from Simon Sinek, which is Start With Why, the book Start With Why, and he's an anthropologist and does a lot of that work. But he describes it really well. So I'm going to play that really
They've grown up in a world of instant gratification. You want to buy something, you go on Amazon, it arrives the next day. You want to watch a movie? Log on and watch a movie. You don't check movie times. You want to watch a TV show? Binge. You don't even have to wait week to week to week, right? I know people who skip seasons just so they can binge at the end of the season, right? Instant gratification. You want to go on a date? You don't even have to learn how to be like, hey. You don't even have to learn and practice that skill. You don't have to be the uncomfortable one who says yes when you mean no, and says no when you mean no, but yes when you... You don't have to swipe right. Bang, I'm a stud. Right?
So this is not unfamiliar to a lot of us, and we're actually going to have a student panel right after this keynote, and you're probably going to hear a lot of the same sentiments as part of that, where the student or that learner has changed, and it's going to change drastically. And it's not like we're thinking about Gen Z in our heads anymore, or Gen Alpha or whatever. It's like, yes, those generation has changed, but everybody's behavior has changed as well. Like we have folks who are now using their devices as or phones as their primary devices, and so on and so forth. So the behaviors have completely changed, and the expectations have changed as we interact with these different brands. And these students are really expecting convenient, fast, and these personal experiences as they interact with the schools, and they look at it as a brand, and they're paying a lot of money for it. So it's really one of the most expensive things that they're doing. So on the other side, though, we we tend to move a little bit slower, and there's there's a huge talent gap, right? I was in a couple of conferences and talking to CIOs, and they mentioned we cannot afford the students that we're graduating. So as soon as that student graduates from this institution, they get grabbed, if they're technically savvy or they're graduating from certain technical degrees, we can't afford them because they're getting paid double, triple, whatever in the industry. So how are we to serve our students better if we just don't have the capabilities or the talent? There's so many talent gaps that exist. And we can't really deliver on this Amazon or Netflix experience and all these different things if we can't, have the capabilities on doing that. So there's huge pressure on us in order to fill that. And this is and that showcases in how our consumers then behave, right? And Jeff Salingo is someone who talks a lot about, the college experience and kind of getting into college and so on and so forth. He's also done some research with us as well. He was the keynote at our Engage Summit this past year. But essentially, in his one of best-selling books, he talks about if the students don't think a college will do enough to provide an engaging student experience and a return on their investments, they'll look elsewhere. Seth talked yesterday about kind of the ROI and kind of the education being compressed in terms of delivering on the product, and how can you deliver a product at lower costs. That's a huge deal right now. And the larger costs come in through administrative costs, come in through overhead, come in through buildings and things that we're moving away from, right? And this is where we feel that AI is a huge force and a huge wave where it can help both on improving the experience and then amplifying the work that we're doing with and how we're doing it today. It is a transformational experience, a transformational technology. And it's not just me talking about this, right? This is something that every sector and everybody is talking about. And there is there is a new documentary on Netflix, if you haven't seen it, that came out in September, mid-September, around Bill Gates and like the idea of what's next. And he talks about these waves and challenges that there exist. But the first one is around AI. So if you haven't seen it, I would highly recommend you take a look at it because it gives you a perspective on every other field out there rather than just higher education. So AI will really change the way that we work, we learn, travel, get healthcare, the way we communicate and we engage with each other. And it's going to it's one of those technologies that it's accelerating really quickly. So the pace of change has not slowed down one bit, and we need to understand it and kind of see how we can help. We can bring in our institutions to help. 9%. This is the percent, one in 10, right? So 1 in 10 CTOs today believe that higher education is ready for AI. And this was a Inside Higher Ed survey of CTOs done very recently, that came out last week or the week before. I believe we talked about this in our podcast, this episode, and then we talked about it as part of the network as well. So 9%. I mean, that is incredible when you think that the institutions being ready for the adoption, and that adoption, that's the current state, but as part of that survey, 23% was the amount of CTOs or institutions that put investment in AI as a top priority as part of their institutions. Now, you have to put your money where your mouth is, right? In order to make change, you have to prioritize things. But when 23% think that AI is a top priority, and 77% think that it's not, and something else is a top priority, that is a big gap there, right? It's a big gap. And it's going to get even bigger as we move things forward, and this technology waves moves a lot faster moving forward. Now, when you look at it in higher education, the technology or AI, like we can look at it through, we're going to look at it through three different lenses, right? And here at Element, we look at it, or the way I see it is, the teaching and learning, we're going to leave that to somebody else, right? Like that's in the classroom. It's perhaps the noisiest part, and also the least actionable today, right? The least actionable today is in the teaching and learning in the classroom. The models have not been built yet, meaning like the deployment models and all of that, like it's only done at the faculty level. There's just so much noise there. So our focus where we see the huge impact is around the student experience and productivity. And JC will talk a little bit later about that and how to think about it. But student experience and productivity are two of the biggest areas that we can focus on today on campus in order to improve that student-centric journey, right? So both of those two things that we talked originally. Now, when you think about the experience side, and we're going to focus on this a little bit more today, there's four kind of buckets that are really important, right? And an AI can be a huge accelerator for these. That first one is around product discovery, right? If you think about, if you're a marketer, if you're enrollment, like all you're doing is you're selling your institution, you're trying for somebody to understand what you're offering and what the ROI is and how to move them through that funnel and through that cycle so they can come. So product discovery is a huge deal. And in a world where most of the consumers are doing most of their discovery and their buying behaviors way before in their research, before they actually show up and before they apply, we call them stealth applicants or stealth whatever, like the discovery experience on how do they know what you're offering, even when they're current students, how do they know what classes are available and so on, so are really important. Hyper-personalized marketing is really important as we know we expect those personal experiences. That's an area where AI can now amplify the work that we do in order to provide that personalized marketing and touch points that we can't really do with just one person. And then the third one, this 24/7 support with assistance or it's 24/7 support, it's around how can people get answers when they need them and how can they interact with systems and check statuses so they don't have to rely on a human doing that for them. Like when the data is available, like why not just ask the AI to be an intermediary which works 24/7, multi-languages, accessible, and so on and so forth. And then the last part, which we're trying to get into, meaning that we're just in the first inning, using our sports analogy here, or baseball analogy, that proactive outreach and proactive agents and assistants. So this third one is around, or the fourth one is around how can our technology and how can AI reach out just like a human would and drive that student and make nudges and do proactive nudges along that journey to move them along, right? That can be a phone call, that can be AI enabled, that can be a text message, an email, a different touch point. It can be a push notification. So just nudging people along and doing proactive, outreach and interventions becomes super important as we once we have those consumers in our funnel, like we need to do that. But how do you do that for hundreds? How do you do that for thousands? It's really impossible unless you go to that, segment of one. All right. So the idea that we have, like, when I talk about chatbots and assistants, a lot of the questions that I get are, well, we already have one, right? Like we've done chatbots, and chatbot has become a really dirty word. So what I wanted to do today is give everybody kind of an overview of what that on how we think about this new wave of AI and how we're going to interact with it, and then how those solutions and the tech stack or the AI stack, so to speak, fits into to this new mode that we're going through. So when you think about older chatbots, and this is a few years ago, our behavior, our interactions have not been great, right? We call them kind of stupid bots because it was all tree-based evals, and it really didn't understand what we were talking in language. Things got a little bit better with natural language processing a few years ago, and they understood a little bit more, but they were still didn't have the empathy, didn't try to be more empathetic, didn't have a lot of that knowledge and the ability to be really good. So they kind of, it was a huge fail in part of that as well. And it didn't make us feel very good because we were trying to automate the process of interacting with our consumer, with our student, but we weren't delivering a really good experience. And now that student feels even worse because they feel like, well, I'm being left, like on the side. So it made us feel really, really bad, right? Because the technology was not good enough. And when you think about it, like we have this idea of how we interact with technology that is based on how we interact with other people as well. We think about others in our lizard brains, and that's kind of what we encoded to do, is that we talk about this notion of anytime we meet somebody new, what is their intent toward us? And then how likely are they to carry that intent? Meaning, are they friendly? Are they likable, trustworthy? So we make those snap judgments right away. And then the next thing is like, well, are they capable? Are they intelligent? Like, can they do the things that they say they're going to do? And we see at the top right of this quadrant, we admire the people who are nice, personable, friendly, and they're very intelligent and capable, right? So we all have those people. And we embody that, or we project that into the technology that we interact with every single day. And those bots really fit into that really contempt down there on that bottom left box. And then BC or before ChatGPT, the bots there feel like we feel pity because they just don't get it, right? They can't get the human emotion or they can't mimic that very well. It wasn't really until ChatGPT that we were now able to interact conversationally with the technology and with the AI and think, oh, wow, this is a game changer. Obviously, a lot of people are using it for different things or asking them about, poetry and create this and that. But over the last 2 years, we've now started to use it for a lot more than that. But the fundamental technology interaction, which is more around these conversational interfaces and human and conversation, just like we talk, we engage, we interact with other humans. This interface is not going to go away. If anything, it's going to now be part of a lot more things. And that's why ChatGPT, for a lot of you, was the first entry into this new world of capable AI that can mimic not just the intelligence of some of the things that humans can do, but also the way that we interact with it. So now we're seeing it being adopted quite possible, very, very fast. So I really believe that the future of technology interactions and how we work and we engage with our systems is conversational. So it's all conversational. No more clicking around. You just say what you want and you have a conversation and that's how you're interacting with systems and that's gotten really, really good, right? And you're seeing that every sector and every tech company is putting a layer or they're moving towards modifying their products or building new what are called AI first products or conversational first products that are using these capabilities of these large language models or generative AI in order to have this conversational interfaces. And you've seen it quite a bit everywhere. Of course, Element is part of that as well. We're building them specifically, and I'll show you some stuff as well. So let's kind of take a look and say, well, okay, like that's really interesting, but ChatGPT, it doesn't have any context. It doesn't like I have to put prompts all the time. And when we look at it, it's like, well, no, hold on a second. We look at it from a very different perspective. It's the capability is enabled, but ChatGPT is a product, right? It's a chatbot product. Underneath, it's using large language models and is using these very capable models. So when we think about the AI stack and how these tools and engagements are going to work on this technology, we should think about like a few things. One of them is the interface, so the universal interface. But then we need a lot more than that, right? We need to understand the memory and it's like remember things and the context that we're in because we switch. We talk to one person, we talk to another person, and it's not the same. So it's like we don't just need somebody smart. We need like very personable things. And then last but not least, it's like we need reasoning and planning. So we need the systems to work autonomously, just like I talk to you and then I give you a task and then you go back and you carry that out. And then you come back, 5 minutes, or you come back 5 days, or you come back 5 hours. And that's the complexity of the task. And those are like agents and stuff like that. So this is kind of the AI stack. And we start with what we're calling the brain, right? This large frontier models that are the brain. And that brain is really like the what's underlying ChatGPT and the conversational interface. And these large models are essentially built with data that from our world in order to mimic the world. And the way we interact with them is through text, right? Through conversation or audio. And that's why they're called large language models, because they're language based, meaning they've been trained on the language, on text and volumes of text and so on and so forth, right? But when some of the examples there of the products that are built on top of it, you're seeing like ChatGPT, Gemini, and Claude being some of the ones. And the first kind of use cases were this writing tool. So the replacing Grammarly, for example, or some of the tools that we had in like Writer AI or a few others that were just writing tools that can you make this better? Can you make it different? Can you make it more friendly? And when we use them, we don't have context and we say, well, it just makes stuff up, right? Like it doesn't work like, my writer. My writer knows a lot about the institution, about certain things. So when it produces content, we call those hallucinations, right? So we all hear these hallucinations. And in generative AI, hallucinations refer to when the AI just makes information that is not present in kind of the input data. So essentially just imagining things. And, by the way, I make this, this is really interesting because the words hallucinations now are getting embedded into our day-to-day vocabulary, where as humans, we actually make shit up all the time, right? It's like we hallucinate quite a bit and, talk to a kid and then, ask him, what's your opinion on this? And then have him explain it. And then now they're going to make all kinds of stuff up, right? And as adults, we do the same thing. But we're now talking about it's like, oh, I hallucinated that, or when you're kind of telling a lie, or when you're saying something that's not true. So that's really interesting how they're entering our vocabulary. So what's the antithesis? Like, what is the fix for these hallucinations? And the fix is really grounding, what we call grounding. So grounding refers to this mechanism where we know we have trusted systems or trusted sources of data, but we use the LLMs as the engine. So we ground their answers and their work in real trusted sources of data, like our knowledge sources and so on and so forth. So that's how we get around the hallucinations or making things up and the context part of it. And that's where we add a second layer, this knowledge layer. So we have the brain, now we add trusted sources of information, and now we can move on and start building, or you see manifestations of this as chatbots, conversational chatbots, because it can remember the history and a few other things, right? And when you look at it, it's like down here, down below, you see all of those sources of knowledge, those groundings, right? So when you ask, about a question, it can be grounded on the history of the conversation that he had with you. For example, in ChatGPT, this is very interesting. It had a memory component that it remembers certain things from prior conversations that you had with it. And then people are now, adding a prompt that's like, based on everything that you know about me on my conversation, like tell me more about myself, right? So it's this really interesting way that when you interact with the system understands a lot about you. So this knowledge, institutional info, and then profile come in. So, so again, this is the grounding part that's very, very important to understand, that as we incorporate AI in our institutions and we buy AI, like we need to have this grounding component and this knowledge bases that are proprietary to us. This is our proprietary data and proprietary content that make the output very, very personal. And where is the most widely used information or source of truth for your students is actually your website. And when you look at your website, they have, how they find information there becomes really interesting. I put this up there because chatbot, this is a survey, it's still at the bottom of the list, but search tools are used for half of the time, and then they just navigate around. But when you ask students, it's like, hey, what do you find frustrating about the website? They're saying, you know what, I can't find programs. So we go back to that student experience slide, and it's like product discovery is the number one thing that we can now use AI to help us out with this, right? Because our websites navigation is terrible. Information is really, really hard to find, and it becomes very confusing, and they can't find the ROI. But the way that they're navigating our website has changed, right? So they're expecting, again, they're expecting these chat GPT like experiences, where you can see now that even in a regular search, they're still typing really long questions, right? So chat GPT like experiences are becoming really, really important to build into your website so students can navigate and can find stuff and can discover stuff rather than and Seth mentioned yesterday as part of the keynote that he predicted the RFI form is dead, right? So let the consumer discover and do their discovery before they actually fill in a form. You don't really need a form if they get all the information they need and all they need without actually reaching out to you, right? So so as part of that, you think about it from a technology perspective, and you need search and generative AI to kind of come together in order to make that happen. And you've seen Google introduce their Google AI overviews, and as you know, if you were an early user of that, there was a lot of fails in there, right? In this case, it's like somebody asking, cheese hot, not sticking to pizza. One of the recommendations was just add a, 1/8 of a cup of non-toxic glue to the sauce to make it more tacky. So the where this information is found in order to provide those answers is very, very important. Remember that grounding, that source of truth. And because Google works across the whole internet, it's very hard for them to distinguish which one is factual and not, and especially around your institution, right? So it becomes really difficult. And because we rely tremendously on Google and for students to send information to our sites, we also see a huge trend that these companies are actually keeping people inside of their ecosystems. So in this case, we have 1/3 of Google searches are actually kept inside of Google. Only 1/3 go to your site, 1/3 of them. So it's really interesting that only 1/3 of, like when I start search for your institution or something, and now with AI overviews, every kind of property tries to keep those people as part of their ecosystem. So what do you do? Like, how do you make the student experience? How do you provide them with the content that's curated by you? This is another example. Literally just the other day, Meta reported that they're working on their own AI-powered search engine too. So you got Perplexity, you got Meta, you got Google, because they understand that knowledge discovery is really, really important. And what we've done is that you need a knowledge base that's an AI knowledge base that is scraping your website, that you can put in documents in there, multiple sources of content from YouTube. You have all the right public controls and so on and so forth. And that's what we build at Element. So now that we had that knowledge base, what we said is that we can start building these AI products on top of it, or experiences for the student. So we built Bolt Discovery, which is an AI search, which sits right on top of your website. So now rather than getting the 10 links, when you search for something, you can ask any question. It will use that knowledge base and provide you very concise answers that put together 4, 5, 10 different pages together. And then it will do follow-ups as well. So this is what Seth was talking about when it's like the RFI is dead, right? I don't need an RFI now to have follow-up questions about requirements and so on and so forth, because I can't go and navigate your website. So that's our Bolt Discovery, and we're actually baking in a lot of that generative question and answer, this follow-up, citations. Of course, you can have a lead capture in there if that student wants more information, but You can hand off things to assistants and so on and so forth. So this whole experience becomes really, really, becomes really nice. So you can overlay that on top of your current website. Now, we move a step further and we say, okay, that's great, but that's just for document stuff, right? It's like, I can put that on my website. What if I need to reach out into my data sources and know more about the student and have that student, sign up for an event or start an application or sign up for an appointment without actually talking to anybody, right? Yeah, you can post all your Calendly links of everybody on your website, but it doesn't really work very well. So you need kind of some context and understanding. And so when we now incorporate skills and tools to the AI, we provide them with a layer that now they can do stuff, right? So that grounding is not just in the knowledge, but it's also having the ability to do work in our systems. And because of that, we can now unlock a productivity part around personalization and content generation of personalization. So when we said about student experience, now you're able to personalize a lot more outreach and a lot more content around the student. So the work that we're doing can be amplified quite a bit. So an element we put together, we call our staff, assistants or assistants that are helping you as the as the user of the system have produce better content and so on and so forth, from copywriting to a whole campaign strategy. And this is kind of a very quick one, but you can now come in and talk about, it's like, hey, catch me up on my tasks for the day. Like I need to have all this different, have a task. I need to reach out to the student. Can you summarize the information around the student? And then you can start thinking about, well, what else can I do, right? It's like, here's a little bit of a summary, but now I would like to create a campaign and give me some recommendations on what's the best outreach. Now, this is a human in the loop, right? And we're always communicating with the AI in here in order to get that. But this is grounded in your data, right? You can ask it to build a campaign, and then you will hand it off to a campaign assistant that's actually putting all of that together. Think about targeting an audience, like it's asking you some of the things that it needs to know, and then it's putting a kind of an outline together. So this is as if you're working with another coworker that's very good at marketing, campaigning, and then that coworker has a team now and says, "Okay, we're gonna write all this stuff for you. We are going to actually go ahead and design the HTML emails for you, and we're going to build a workflow all together." So that's kind of the idea behind this AI, is that you can now do hyper personalized marketing at scale without having to spend hours or months or weeks writing content specifically by hand, because the AI can actually amplify and do a lot of that work for you. Now, the last part is that we add personality, right? It's like, okay, you know what? Skills are great. They help us do a lot, right? We have the knowledge base, it's grounded, it's our content, it's our, kind of walled garden. We give it a lot of the tools and skills. So rather than, adding more UI to build stuff, like they can do stuff on their own, the AI. But then we add the fourth layer, which is personality. And like, wouldn't it be really nice if they worked together? And wouldn't it be really nice if they have a personality as well? Just like a student comes in and they talk to a counselor, that counselor can have a very different perspective. If they're admissions counselor, if they're domestic versus international, if they're talking to a financial aid person versus a peer. And that's exactly what we built, is that now we have built different types of AIs that are specifically built to I won't say impersonate, but embody the characteristics and the personality and the knowledge of individual people that are communicating with that student to provide that support. And they can then work together in order to. So what you see here is an example. You talk to a peer advisor around campus experience. You can kind of sign up for that event. or an open house, but they can actually work together in order to hand things off from one to the other. So because it's using a tool, it can register for that event, it can create a personalized invitation. You come back, it remembers the history. You'd like to apply, it's handing it off now to that admissions advisor, Carolyn. So she knows more about what applications are available, what would you like to apply for, kind of driving you through that whole experience, right? And then because it's connected to the systems, it makes that student experience. It doesn't matter if they're coming in at 12 o'clock at night or 6 in the morning. It doesn't matter. And then also multilinguality, like this accessibility is really important. So how can, first generation, so on and so forth, or even international students communicate with you, giving you, getting information or getting things done? So this is a huge unlock, everybody. Like this is probably one of the biggest unlocks. And I started the framing because with the older chatbots, because we still have a PTSD from the implementations of these older AIs where it was very manual work and the results weren't very good. We are in a very, very different place right now in our technology evolution that you should really think about these new AIs as amplifiers and improving that student experience. Huge results for a lot of our partners where they're seeing tremendous decreases in call volumes and huge resolution rates in there and tons of time saved as well. And now you start thinking about it's like, well, remember when we posed that problem where we don't have enough, there's a talent gap and we don't have enough. Well, now you can hire AI to do a lot of those work for you. So you can have an AI admissions team that's supporting that student along that journey. You can have an AI student support and student success team that's supporting them along the current classroom journey. You can have an AI marketing team that can support your internal communications and the student engagement teams to build things a lot faster, to accelerate the rapid pace at which we need to change our targeting and our strategy very quickly for different programs and amplify that work as well. And you can have AI data analyst team that can give you the ROIs that you need in order for you to make smarter decisions as you're moving through these different conversations in here. So AI assistance is now how, or AI agents, this word agents, you're going to hear that a lot going forward. For Element, we call them assistants because, agents have a little bit of a different connotation, but assistants are using multiple agents underneath this agent architecture to work together to provide that ROI. And that's how we think about, what an AI first platform for student engagement looks like, right? Or if AI first approach, it's that, we are thinking about the core job to be done is supporting that student throughout the journey. We can't do that without providing and amplifying ourselves and the work that we do and providing this digital first or AI first experience that is, becoming more and more relevant in every single industry. And you're going to say, well, what's next after this? Because we can write this stuff, we can deploy. Now, what do? We just, we reach out to that student because we get recommendations from the AI. Well, what's next is actually something even more exciting that I feel we are at the point where AI can deliver this. And we are at a point where AI and the models that we're using and kind of the techniques can provide a mass personalization for students. So the student can now is changing their behavior to interact with the AI first, rather than thinking, hey, I need to reach to a human right away, because they can get better answers, they can get more answers all the time, and they can get more consistent answers, right? So, and then the other part is more proactive. So then there is a reciprocal approach where the AI is actually looking at all the things that the student is doing and is making recommendations for goals on how to do the next thing. So when you think about the personalization, it's like these AIs or any system or any app or any experience needs to be an AI first experience for the student. So ask me anything, right? That big, huge search box that you get on ChatGPT now needs to be front and center, or any student portal or student hub, and kind of student experience. It doesn't matter if it's in the admissions side, if it doesn't matter if it's in the current student success side. It needs to be an AI first conversational interface that we work with. And the next part is around proactivity, and that's what we're focusing on right now. Is how do we build all the pieces that we know about the student in order to kind of take them to the next level and do proactive outreach to those students, rather than figuring out, like just have the AI say, you need to reach out to this student, but it's like, okay, well, do I send them an email? Do I send them an SMS? Like, how much time do I have to do that? The predictive analytics and predictive modeling that are happening underneath now can recommend what students to reach out, but you need additional generative AI to figure out. It's like, hey, here is the best messaging, here's the best channel, and by the way, I wrote that for you, and I'm going to send it out on your behalf. So you don't have to you can still be in the loop, but it's all proactive and it's happening behind the scenes. So to kind of wrap this all together, we really believe that personalized engagement at scale requires AI. And that's what is driving us right now. And that's what I'm working, and really, really excited as these new capabilities come in. I'm really giddy and say, wow, we can now make this part of the journey, a student journey, better. We can make it faster. We can make it more personal, while providing the experience they feel they need from your brand to match the consumer experiences, and the experiences that they need as part of their journey to kind of help them get into school, do well, and then graduate and get that ROI. So that's what I had for today. Hope I give you a peek into how I think about this, and what the possibilities are, and not just the possibilities, but what is there today to actually get this implemented and get this into your campuses today, this type of technology.
Ardis, that was amazing. Thank you so much for setting the tone for day 2. We've got some questions in the chat room. Folks, if you have not dropped your question in yet for Ardis, now is the time. But we're going to start, Ardis, with Brittany's question. She is asking, how do you mitigate the human aspect of how a student might phrase or ask a question, versus how the chatbot is interpreting what they mean? And, she adds the point that a staff member doing the testing, right, might not ask that question in the same way that a student does. And it seems like she's had the experience where in those cases, the chatbot has responded like, I don't know, go visit the website. And like, that's obviously not helpful.
Yeah. So that's a clear indication of a Gen 1 chatbot. You remember those stupid bots, or those tree-based? You had to provide all the permutations of the answers. So if a student asked it a different way, then it wasn't able to match it. So that is the first generation that we're talking about. It's very, very different today. As a matter of fact, I have a very good example where one of our schools, we were looking at the log, and there was a student from India, and asking a question this was like 9 p.m. or something like that, and they asked a question, but they used a lot of British English connotations and words, and I had no idea what they meant. But we actually saw the bot respond in the right way and gave him the answer, and then at the end, the student said, "Oh, thank you very much. This is super helpful." And so he thanked the AI for giving that answer. And this was, again, later on at night. So, that is a very different, technology that you're seeing. Even though it's called a chatbot, it is not. It's a very different generative AI type of chatbots that we're talking about today.
Awesome. I actually have a question for you. So I think the line between marketing and student success is continuing to blur. In fact, our friend Devin Ferguson, right? Like his job title is literally executive director of marketing and student success. And I think we're going to start to see job titles like that more and more as those lines keep blurring. And so I'm curious, Ardis, how you see AI being leveraged to serve both functions without compromising any authenticity or any trust.
So look, Devin or that institution has moved to a kind of like a system-wide model, like one support, one office, one student model. So that student doesn't understand that there's different offices behind the scenes or different doors that they have to, like the manifestation of that is when they go from, hey, I forwarded your email to this person. Hey, you got to go to this office to sign this paper and so on and so forth. So the model needs to change institutionally, internally, but AI has the capability of actually being the front door for all of these different back office doors that we have and unify them all together. So that's the way that I think about it, but it needs to be an institutional mandate that it's like the chatbot can't just be, oh, it's financial aid chatbot, or it's a financial aid, it's an admissions one. It can be used for all of those different things, but there needs to be an institutional change.
Yeah. Paul's asking in the chat room if the suggestions that you offered today are platform agnostic, or do our attendees need to go invest in specific platforms? Just kind of curious about your thoughts on that.
So they're not platform agnostic in the sense that, I mean, these are the things that we're building in Element 451 today, but Element 451 has all of these different things can be added on to a Slate or can be added on to a Salesforce or other systems as well. So it can coexist. So you can add the functionality without replacing those other tools, but it has to be part of Element 451. Like we offer all these different things as part of our platform. You don't have to buy the whole thing, right? If that's what the idea here is. So they're not agnostic in the platform because the data lives in your platform. So it has to have a place where the data is available. Without that, and that data can be shared, but without that, you can't just say go to ChatGPT or go to Claude and then get some of the personalization there. So I don't know if I answered that question correctly, but I will share the Notebook LM version that was generated. So I don't have that, but I'll share it. I'll share it in later on.
Perfect. We will drop it somewhere where you can all find it. And we so appreciate you all being with us to start the day. See you in the next one all. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.